Hello, everybody. Stephen Moore here, back with you for episode 4 of the Why is Life So Hard series. I'm going to talk today about the role that loneliness and isolation play in making life hard. Now, loneliness and isolation are huge today, higher than it's ever been pretty much, but it is especially high for a unique group of people, and we can learn a lot from thinking about their challenges. That is, it used to be that the loneliest people in our society were the elderly. And it kind of makes sense when you think about as we get older, we tend to at some point maybe retire or go part-time in the workforce, and we lose some of our social structure there. Also, with older age tends to come health issues, and it becomes harder to get out. And I remember, for instance, my mom got to where, although she was always a big churchgoer, she got to where she wouldn't go to evening events just because she couldn't see very well at night. Very understandable, but her church family was a big part of her contact group. The new loneliest people are people under the 25 and under, the youngest people who, interestingly, are often around people a lot. You know, they are going to school 7 or 8 hours a day. They have much larger access to friend groups through sports or whatever. Well, what I've seen in working with young people in a camp is that, and this last year in particular was very powerful, is that you'll see these young people running around, laughing, having a good time, and it seems like they're very well connected. And then when you talk to them one-on-one, one of the most common phrases that I heard from this group of kids who are just surrounded by people and sleeping in bunk houses where there's people all around them, the most common phrase that I heard that is really disturbing is, "I don't feel like anyone knows me." Wow, surrounded by people and feeling lonely and feeling like no one knows you. Hey, some of you listening to this right now are probably right there. Am I right? So the question is, why are we so lonely, and also how do we get out of it? Well, here's one thing. If you haven't seen my podcast on light issues, this relates to it because we talked about the light that is emitted from smartphones. Well, that's not the only danger from smartphones and other electronic devices. One of the things that smartphones do is that they are very compelling and addictive. They're designed to be addictive and to keep you engaged. And so we spend, as a society, a lot of time with our phones in our hands and our heads tilted down. You've all seen this. I mean, you can go out. I've seen couples on dates where the lady's really dressed up, the guy is too, and they go to a nice restaurant. I'm there traveling just by myself, and I'm watching this couple, and they're sitting there across from each other with their phone, with their heads down. Really tragic. You'll see a parent with a young child going out somewhere, and the child's sitting there, young child, and the parent's just on their phone. You see families sitting together, everyone's on the phone. Smartphones, although we say it's a connection, it's a virtual connection, social media, not social at all. These phones are not very connective. We have to be very careful how we use them, because what we're doing is we're walking around and we're not seeing anybody. We actually get emotionally upset if we forget our phones and don't have them with us. Well, there's people all around us. There's people all around us. So first of all, is that understand that smartphones are a big player in how we're becoming more lonely than ever. And an interesting factor just about the young people is that it's hard for us to understand, but we have a generation of young people now who grew up from their formative years, teen years, where they had smartphones, and they never actually learned to sit down and converse with each other and to trust each other one-on-one. In fact, the smartphone works against that, because what you do is you hold up the camera and you take pictures of yourself, and you use filters, and you try to you create this image online of who you are. But unfortunately, apparently, young people begin to believe that people are relating with that image, and so they're afraid to be honest and genuine about what they're struggling with and what they are really having trouble with anyone, because they don't want to ruin that image that they've curated through their phones. So just understand that smartphones are a big creator of loneliness and isolation. Kind of related to that for all of us. I mean, this was strangely true of me, except I had a unique problem that forced me to learn this. Most of us have never been trained how to converse. In other words, how to have two-way, open and honest communications. We learn to talk mainly by listening and modeling it. I mean, with little kids, we're listening to mom and dad talk, they talk to us, and we kind of learn to talk. But we never are really trained in how to be a good conversationalist. I just happened to learn when I was a teenager because I knew something was wrong with me. Probably if I had been born later, I would have been diagnosed with something like Asperger's or an autism spectrum disorder. But I had real trouble communicating with people. I had trouble, I was very nervous and very insecure and just wasn't good at making conversation. So I felt very lonely. I wanted to be different. I had a teacher in high school, the ROTC sergeant named Sergeant Howard Wilson, who read the book, old classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. There's a link to that book on my website, stevekmoore.com, if you want to look at that. Still very true principles in that book. The overriding principle in that book that I was fascinated by as a 17-year-old who was extremely lonely is that Dale says that if you want to be considered a good conversationalist, just ask other people about them and listen. It's that easy. And so I started doing that just out of selfish motives. I just wanted more friends. I was lonely. It was all selfish to begin with. And then something started happening. All of a sudden, people would see me and they would light up. And they would come to me and talk to me. And interestingly, most of them have this thing that we healthy people have. It's called reciprocity. If I ask you questions and listen to you, then you're also at some point going to say, well, hey, how are you doing? And that was happening for me too. But I also discovered something else that was totally surprising that really transformed my desire to start conversations. And that is, as I started asking people questions about them, all these people, and I especially remember some of these young girls I went to school with who I just thought were absolutely perfect people, beautiful. And I thought, I just gave them I endowed them automatically with all these great qualities. And as I sat down and asked them about themselves, what I discovered was, man, they're just people like me. And they have been through some struggles. They don't see themselves the way that I see them. They look at themselves in the mirror and they just see, and some of them had some very rough home lives. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, wow, people are fascinating. And so it just became very natural. If I had just a spare moment somewhere and I'm with someone I don't know, I'd just strike up a conversation. There are other books you can get to talk about how to start conversations. And one of them I know that I got for one of my teenagers that I absolutely loved. It's called How to Talk with Almost Anyone. You can look it up on any of the popular websites to buy books with. So that's just another point. Most of us have never been taught how to converse. It's worthwhile, no matter what your age, is to improve your skills and learning that and practice it when you go out. So, first of all, is watch your smartphone usage, because that can be very isolating. Second of all, learn to converse. Learn how to initiate and sustain a conversation. And then realize the truth of something, a couple of points, and that is that isolation and loneliness feeds on itself. It's just a very unfortunate thing that when you're isolated and you're feeling lonely, you tend to feel depressed. And because you feel depressed, you don't really feel like talking to anybody. You kind of want people to come to you, maybe and attend to you, but you have to understand, you look out in the big world, a lot of people are in the same situation right now. And so we have to go before God with the strength that only He can give us and just do what we know is right, which is we need to make an effort. We need to use our God-given volition and strength and His power to get out there and connect with people. Talking with a friend of mine who was a little bit older than me, really struggling with depression and some other issues, and he was just talking about he was just so lonely. And I told him, I said, I've thought about it, because my wife and I talk about this, is that if something were to happen to her, I truly know that if I'm going to be lonely, that's because I choose to be. I've got a church family who loves me. I've got a choir family who loves me. I've got a community that has so many good organizations that I can go take part in and helping others. One of the best things you can do if you're lonely and isolated is to turn outward. When you start going in and trying to get into others people's lives and you're asking what's going on with them and you're hearing their problems and you're trying to help them work through them, it takes a lot of the weight of inwardness off of you, but you have to do it. And it takes the strength that only God can truly provide, because, man, depression can absolutely knock you down. Well, that's pretty much it. Just a few thoughts. If you want more on the topic, remember, please just look and get my book, Superhero Who God Knows You Are. There's a link to buy this on my website, stevekmoore.com, on the printed version of this episode, or you can find it at all your common resellers. That's it for now. Tune in next time. Let's do this.